You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, each week we bring you important, very useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And as I do each and every show, thanking all of you. Our listeners are growing. We grow organically each and every day, more and more listeners. And I know why, because you're sharing podcast, individual shows or podcasts with friends and family. So many of you are listening to the show on either Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, more and more coming out all the time. And we're there. So we really appreciate it. And I know why you're sharing the information, because we have just some great content, great information, wonderful guests, and I'm not going to disappoint you today. We have with us Liz O'Donnell. Liz is the founder of Working Daughter, an organization dedicated to keeping family caregivers in the workplace by making care and career compatible. Working Daughter advises companies on how to support employees and customers who are caregivers, supports people balancing elder care and career through its thriving online community, and also issues best places for working daughters to work list and sponsors National Working Daughters Day. So Liz, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Frank. Good to be here.
Yeah, so this is just such an important, subject matter, and I was really looking forward to our discussion today. But maybe we could just start out sharing with people kind of how you got started with this. I'm guessing that it had been a personal experience that you were going through, but tell us kind of how you got going and what was the drive in starting Working Daughter?
Yeah, it was absolutely a personal experience, which I think is a very common theme for so many of us in this industry. I was going along in life, working mother, busy, just published my first book about working motherhood. My parents were in their 80s, and I didn't realize yet, that what I was doing was caregiving. I was just helping them out as they aged. And I was feeling so squeezed and so busy, and I didn't really understand why I seemed to be, that much more underwater than some of my peers. And my parents lived about an hour away. So, it started out a couple times a month going down and helping them out. Then it became every weekend. Then it became, they stopped driving. So then it was doctor's appointments and groceries and sorting the pills. And I call that phase of caregiving the caregiver creep, where it creeps up on us and we're not even aware that it's happening. And that's why you hear so many people who don't even identify as caregivers. They just think they're being good family members. And I was going along that way as best as I could. And then both of my parents got sick and actually were both diagnosed on the same day, my father with Alzheimer's and my mother with stage 4 cancer. So I went from the creep phase to the crisis phase. That's when I knew I was a caregiver, and that's when I knew finding myself so alone, so unprepared, that when I got through the other side, I was going to make sure others didn't feel the same way.
Wow. So were you working for a company at that time, or were you working for yourself, or not working at the
I was
time?
working for a company, and, blessing and a curse at the same time. I was a remote worker well before the pandemic. So my company was based in California. I was the only remote employee in Boston. The blessing was no one knew where I was working from, and I worked from a broom closet at the hospice home where my mother lived for the last few months of her life. I've worked from ambulance bays in emergency rooms because it was quieter than being, in the waiting area. I mean, I've sat in wheelchairs and done conference calls because it was the only place to find a seat. So that was quite a blessing that I had flexibility well before, we all kind of learned to work from home. But the curse part of it was I had never really built up great relationships with my coworkers because I wasn't in the office. I was that strange beast who was, working remote and showed up on, I think it was WebEx pre-Zoom. Right. So I didn't really the relationships I needed to kind of have my back as I was going through all of it.
Yeah. So, so it seems like, you were able to, that was very difficult anyway, but, as far as managing your work and having to deal with your parents, I'm sure it was difficult, but you were able to somehow manage through that. People that are working for companies that, have pretty strict policies and maybe don't give as much time off and aren't as flexible. I mean, what thoughts do you have to those employees who may be going through something similar that you had to go through while they were working?
Yeah, you know what? My heart breaks for them. I remember being on the commuter rail coming home. I did have an office that I went into in the city. And one night I was coming home on the commuter rail and the train broke down. I don't know why, but that's just the commuter rail here in Boston. And we were all sitting in the dark. And when the engine or the motor stops running, all of a sudden you can hear everybody's conversation. And there was a guy sitting right behind me in the dark on his cell phone. And I heard him say to his wife, "Listen, if you want to be at the hospital tomorrow with your mother, be there. And if you get fired, so be it. We will figure it out together." And I mean, and that's what's happening. That's the false choice that these companies that aren't supportive of caregivers, that haven't realized that it's the fastest growing employee base, that's what they're going through, these false choices. And so what I say to those caregivers is to try to think about things, what's going to matter in 5 hours, what's going to matter in 5 days, and what's going to matter in 5 years. And if you can look at every choice that you have to make with that lens and think about what's the most important thing, and without any judgment and without wondering what other people are going to think about your decision, because you may decide the most important thing is not to go to the hospital or not to be by your parents' side, because you know that you can't lose your paycheck and that you need to save for your own retirement. And you know what? That's okay, and you don't have to defend that choice. And if you decide, you know what, the most important thing is this relationship, and I can risk my career, then go. But we have to make these decisions through our own lens and our own value system, and not worry about what others think, because unfortunately, that's what people are being forced to do.
Yeah, there's been all sorts of studies done, but one that I remember reading a few years back, I'm sure you read it too, was done by Harvard Business Review. Not Harvard Business Review, Harvard Business School, I'm sorry. Harvard Business School.
The caring company, that
report.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And there was a disconnect. That disconnect, they talk to the companies who don't, a lot of them don't think they have this problem, and you talk to the employees, go, yeah, but they're like they're afraid to even bring it up to their employer of their situation, in fear of losing a job or whatever. So, everybody suffers. How do we get companies to change?
Yeah, I was afraid to bring it up because I knew what my boss would say to me was, you need to take some time off, because, dealing with these 2 diagnoses on the same day, and then moving my parent, my mom to hospice and my dad to memory care, and all the logistics and all of the medical appointments, and, I had to figure out, what their finances were, and did they have wills and all of that good stuff. And so I knew if I told her exactly what I was going through, she'd say, take some time. But we didn't have paid leave, and I couldn't afford to. So I hid it for the longest time. I thought I was doing a good job. I was actually, doing a terrible job. And so what I say to people, because I get the question all the time, is should I tell work what I'm going through? And my really helpful answer is always, it depends. And I think it depends because we all have to observe and evaluate our own company cultures and see what's safe. As a caregiving advocate, of course, I would love the answer to be, of course, companies need to see it, because, in that report you're talking about, they recommend that companies survey their employees, and they'll be surprised just how many are in caregiving roles. But caregiving is invisible in the workplace, especially caregiving of adults. With children, you know when somebody's going out on leave. If somebody's, giving birth versus adopting, you see the physical changes in them, right? So you know they're going out on caregiving leave. They might hang pictures. You might throw a shower for them. They're happy to talk about the addition to their life when they come back to the office. It's a joyous thing, and it's also, very common and accepted to talk about this at work.
Right.
Elder care is completely different. You don't know, all of a sudden Liz is going into the conference room and shutting the door and taking lots of personal calls, or, coming in late or leaving early or seeming scatterbrained. You don't know why. You just think that Liz isn't performing anymore, because Liz isn't going to tell you, I was meeting with an oncologist or I was in the emergency room. I mean, these are personal, private, and sometimes icky, right, situations. So we don't see caregiving in the workplace, and we can't assume that it's not happening.
So how do we do a better job in supporting the caregiving employees?
I think talking about it, conversations like the one we're having are so helpful. I have seen such a change. When my parents got sick, it was 2014. I've seen a major shift in the conversation and awareness of it, which is really encouraging. I think we, continue to prod employers to review their benefits and their support programs and make sure that they're talking about family care as opposed to, maternity or even parenting leave, and look at family leave. Make sure that the conversation takes into consideration all kinds of caregiving scenarios, not just the parenting caregiving scenarios. I always say to employers, remember, you have, not just workers who are parents, but workers with parents too. And the benefits have to be equal and fair to both, and they have to be talked about. We have to if you don't name it, and that's why I came up with the term working daughter, which has its flaws, right? Because 40% of all family caregivers are men, but I needed a term that people would say, oh, I get it, like a working mother. And so that's why we came up with it. I think flexibility is the number one thing that employers can do to support caregiving employees. And, I know there's a push to come back to work into pre-pandemic work styles, but that's real estate driven. And quite frankly, we've had plenty of time to figure out what we're going to do with reimagine this expensive commercial real estate. Damn it,
Right.
I don't think we can risk families' well-beings because of that. And so there's study after study after study that shows that people can be highly, if not more productive when we allow them flexibility. So I think that's the number one thing companies can do.
Yeah. So, as you know, have been in the senior care industry, and we're always putting an emphasis on the health of the caregiver. All right, we're more concerned about their health. Of course, we're concerned about the person who's needing the care, but we sometimes forget about the caregiver, and many times, and statistics show that sometimes they get sick and pass before the person who was needing care in the first place. So I know that you have some thoughts about that and how maybe ways that caregiving could actually make you healthier. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's not so much that I have ideas about how caregiving can make you healthier. There's actually research that caregiving does make people healthier, which I think is so exciting. There's research out of University of South Florida and Johns Hopkins, two professors there who've studied something and found something called the caregiver's gain. And now these two professors have done years and years of research about the negative effects of caregiving. And so this new research doesn't negate the fact that caregiving is stressful and can lead to, high blood pressure and stress and, weight gain and, all of the things that are caused by super stressful scenarios. But they've also found in studying caregivers compared to non-caregivers after caregiving that caregivers have better cognitive abilities, better physical strength, better longevity. So it can lead to longer life, quite frankly, once you get through it, of course, and higher self-esteem and better sense of connection. And they liken that those last two things to the fact that, at our core as humans, what we all want is an authentic, genuine connection to another human being. And when you're showing up for someone in, their most vulnerable moments, perhaps end of life, you connect with that person typically. And so I think if more caregivers knew about the caregiver gain, if they knew that, sort of like exercise, right? Not all of us like the burn or the sweat or the 5 a.m. wake-up call to go to the gym, but we know we're going to feel good for having done it, that endorphin, and we know that it's good for us. The caregiving is actually, similar to exercise in that sense. And I think that's really exciting.
That's great. That's great. So we're going to take a quick 30-second break, I promise you. And then when we come back, I want you to share with people more about how they can learn more about what you're doing and your book. And I'd like to talk a little bit about your thoughts on why you think businesses should consider hiring family caregivers. But when we come back, we'll talk more about that. All right.
Okay.
So are you looking for a program at your company to assist employees with elder care needs for their loved ones? Well, EASE is the Employee Assistance Solutions for Elder Care offered by Senior Care Authority. In today's multi-generational workforce, the need for a comprehensive benefits package of senior-related services is greater than ever. With this type of benefit package, you bring an important opportunity to recruit and retain talent and provide the support for your employees' needs. It's time to offer an employee benefit that includes elder care services. With EASE, you'll have a dedicated team of local elder care consultants nationwide to support your employees, which will help you tackle the growing need for elder care services. To learn more, go to www.seniorcareauthority.com/ease, EASE, or call 888-809-1231, extension 1. So we are back with Liz O'Donnell. Liz is the founder of Working Daughter. And so I'd like to, share with our listeners, share with them, it's commercial time. So go, tell them about how they could learn more about Working Daughter, maybe get involved in some way. Tell us a little more about your book. I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Fantastic. Yeah. So everything I'm going to mention can be found at workingdaughter.com. We make it pretty simple. Our mission is twofold. The first is to make sure no one goes through caregiving alone. And to that end, we have a private Facebook community where people have peer support, 24/7. And it's an incredible, incredible group. We have a book called Working Daughter, A Guide to Caring for Your Aging Family While Making a Living, and you can get that on Amazon or in your local library. And it's full of, practical, actionable advice, as well as my own personal story. Tough topic, but you might actually find parts of it pretty funny, because if you can't laugh, you cry, right? And then we have a membership program. So for people who are going through caregiving who want one-on-one support, small group coaching, they can sign up for an annual membership, and we have programs and content just for our members, as well as monthly calls where they can, ask anything and get counseling and advice. And then the second part of our mission is to make care and career compatible. And to that end, we work with companies to make their workplaces more caregiving compatible. We do that through speaking, education. We have a Best Companies for Working Daughters program to build awareness and for companies to benchmark what they're offering versus other companies. And you mentioned during the commercial, ease and benefits for companies. We add on to those benefits by creating community. So many companies actually sign up their caregiving employees for our membership, so that their caregiving employees may be getting benefits through other organizations. But we add the community piece, which I think is so important for people to know that they're not peer support.
Great. Well, good. That's great. You're doing wonderful things. So, and that's workingdaughter.com, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, you had sent me some notes ahead of time, and one of the things it said is why businesses should consider hiring family caregivers. Talk to us more about your thoughts there.
Well, so that's one of my favorite topics because, as I mentioned, even as I went through caregiving, and I was pretty senior in my organization, but was afraid to tell anybody because, I felt like there was a stigma attached to being so busy and distracted in my personal life. But when I think about the attributes of a family caregiver, I think, companies are crazy not to want these people on their payroll. Caregivers have incredible attention to detail. They're managing multiple departments in their own life. I mean, they're sorting pills and medication. I mean, some people think about elder care as, oh, you drive your parents to the doctor and maybe, sort some pills. Right. Well, when I was a caregiver, I administered medication. I inserted IVs because there was a home IV pole. I did wound care. I gave injections. I mean, and I didn't go to med school. I am not a trained nurse, right? So caregivers are able to manage multiple things. I was dealing with, 7 different departments at the hospital. And I dare you to find a hospital administrator who can get 7 different departments to cooperate the way a family caregiver can when they're trying to get care for their family. So the management skills, the organizational skills, the negotiation skills, don't tell me that my father's coming in at 1 o'clock for a doctor's appointment, get me the 9 a.m. because it's the difference between me missing a whole day of work, or a half day of work, and advocacy. And then also, 10,000 people are turning 65 every day in this country. We're in a rapidly aging society. And so many companies are talking about the impact of Gen Z, and super important, right, that we are looking at a multi-generational workplace. But we have a massive senior community, and that's a massive market opportunity, and caregivers are tapped into that.
Right. Well, that's great information. So the actual businesses themselves, I know you do work with a lot of different companies, and I'm going to just tell you about some of our own experiences. Generally speaking, is that companies that we work with on various elder care programs are very, very excited about it. They want to offer it. I mean, it's I don't want to, you're probably not surprised by that. They see the benefit of doing it. The challenge is the communication amongst their employees, and because when an employee needs help with family caregiving, if that's a benefit that's being offered through their employer, they really don't care about that benefit until the need arises. All right, and that may be who knows when, and sometimes people need that type of help once in a lifetime. Hopefully, only once, maybe zero. Hopefully, but. Any thoughts there to those that are listening and that have businesses or working at companies, and how to better communicate within the company itself? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think one of the most effective things they can do is to offer and support groups within the organization, whether it's an ERG or an informal support group or BRG, whatever, companies call them all different kinds of things, right? These employee resource groups, because it's true. We don't think about these benefits until we absolutely need them. And then oftentimes we're so overwhelmed, we don't even know how to access them. But if you think about employee behavior, right? Employees are more likely to ask a coworker, hey, what's the policy, or what did you do, or what do you think I should do, before they're going to go to a manager or to HR or to their employee handbook, right? They signed off that they read the employee handbook on day 5, and they probably haven't looked at it since. So when we have community and peer groups, then things spread through word of mouth and people can share their personal experiences. So I think that's a really effective way to overcome what so many companies are struggling with, which is what you outlined. And when you think about these HR departments and these business owners and managers, there's so much now that the workplace is being asked to do to support their employees. I mean, our workplace is where we get all of our healthcare support. And now, so many of us are looking for mental health support and just overall wellness and sense of, well-being, because the world is a crazy, stressful place. And so work is the one place we show up, 40 hours a week and really rely on. So I understand how hard it is for business owners and HR departments to put all of these messages out. And that's why I think when there are affinity groups within an organization, they do that work for you.
That's great. Good advice. So we only have a couple minutes left, Liz, and maybe I'm going to just kind of turn over to you. Any words of wisdom that you have to either people out there that are kind of starting to go through to something maybe similar that you were going through with your parents? It's just starting to happen now. Any words of wisdom that you may have for them, or anything else that you that I didn't ask you that you'd like to cover?
Well, I would say, a message to the business owners is that supporting caregivers doesn't have to be costly or difficult. It can be simple things like, community, like adding some, benefits packages. So it doesn't have to be expensive and costly. So that's one message to them. My message to people who might be going through it or are about to go through it would be, to me, caregiving is an energy game. It's really about mindset. I mean, of course, it's about all the logistics, but that's just one part of it. And so to me, caregivers really need to think about why they're caring for somebody, think about who and how they want to be, and come up with a caregiving path for themselves that's unique to them and that honors who they want to be. I mean, if you look at any of the marketing materials out there, from senior living companies to benefits companies, I mean, just, Google images about elder care, and you're going to see these same, 5 images pop up over and over of the beautiful woman with the gorgeous white hair who's like looking off into the distance, smiling right, because the future's bright, and her loving daughter right next to her, holding her hand. I mean, my mother and I never sat like that ever, and we had a good relationship. But I bring it up because these images in our subconscious make us think that caregiving is supposed to be easy and loving and wonderful. And it is all those things at some level, and it's so hard, so scary, so isolating at times. And so, I think it's really important we mind our own messages in our head that, I'm doing the best I can. I'm showing up. It's okay to put my own needs first sometimes. My life matters too. And so I would say really watch your thoughts. It's not the most tangible advice, but I think it's the most powerful.
Great. Liz O'Donnell, workingdaughter.com. Liz, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. Have a safe week, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.